whole premise of wokeness is there is no spiritual life, there's only power. Everything that we believe in is power. Femininity is power, masculinity, they're constructs of power. And so they can't say anything. You can't say anything about what it is to be a human being. You know, I've always thought, what would happen if you told a story in which a woman character starts out as a powerful businesswoman and then says, you know what, I don't want to do this. I want to make a family. I want a man to take care of me so I can do this. You know, you can't make that movie.
What's going on with the movies? I can't remember. I mean, there's the odd movie that comes along and I go, oh, I'd like to see that. But nothing really compels me like it used to.
Yeah.
What's going on? Well,
there's two things. One is that art forms have a natural life cycle. You know, they can come back. They don't necessarily die forever, but they rise up at their peak, usually very early on. To me, the peak year of the movies is 1939. I mean, and what happens at that peak is that the popular movies and the critically acclaimed movies are the same movie. So when you get it,
I see where this is going.
Well, it's true. You know, you get an era like where the theater is thriving. Shakespeare is the popular playwright.
Yeah.
You get the novels are thriving. Dickens, you know, one of the greatest novelists ever, is also the best-selling novelist. 1939. If you look at the 10 Oscar nominees, they're also some of the greatest films ever made, including The Wizard of Oz, and I don't know if Gone with the Wind was that year, but it was almost that year. Mr. Smith, one of the Frank Capra movies, they're just brilliant movies. As an art form ages out, they split into popular trash, like these Marvel movies, these superhero movies, and these kind of tiny little intellectual exercises that the critics think are oh so important, but the rest of us can't stay awake through. And that's the one thing that's happening. It's simply a matter of the art form aging out. And a lot of that energy went over to TV in the 2000s, the early 2000s. I remember watching a show here called The Shield and thinking, oh, gee, they're doing everything I did in the second golden age of mystery writing. I was writing characters just like this, and now they've all moved over to TV. And we had 20 years of great TV here. I mean, it was really brilliant stuff. But the other thing is this idea of wokeness, which is actually a very deep. We use it as a slogan, as a catchword, but it's actually a very deep philosophical moment. It is the bottom of atheistic philosophy. And it's impossible to make a good story out of it because it has no inner life. The whole premise of wokeness is there is no spiritual life, there's only power. Everything that we believe in is power. Femininity is power, masculinity, they're constructs of power. And so they can't say anything. You can't say anything about what it is to be a human being. You know, we were talking about there are no women characters. I've always thought, what would happen if you told a story in which a woman character starts out as a powerful businesswoman and then says, you know what, I don't want to do this. I want to make a family. I want a man to take care of me so I can do this. You know, you can't make that movie. And yet that is the movie, right? You can't make a movie where a guy comes to town and builds a business and he's the hero of the movie, you know, because it's all about power. So if he has power, he must be the bad guy. When you get rid of the spiritual life, there's only power, and that's not a good story.
Wow. You know, Yuri Bezmenov, I don't know if you're familiar with him, he was a KGB defector from the Soviet Union.
Yes.
He has lectures on YouTube, and this is one of the things he talked about, how in the movies at a certain point, the police, the generals, the army, they all became the bad guys. Right. The criminal's the good one. The KGB, not the KGB, the army colonel, he's always the dumb one, the whatever. But I want to come back to the first of those two, Andrew, because what you're talking about is a perfect metaphor for politics more broadly. Because you have an elite that is so up its own arse, it is completely out of touch with the ordinary person.
Yep.
And so,
which is typical, by the way.
Right. Well, right. Yeah. And so that's why the movie, or the screenshots from like the Rotten Tomatoes ratings for comedy shows, like a Dave Chappelle latest show or a movie, and now they're parodies of themselves, where like critics 100%, you know, they like or dislike something, and it's the opposite way for the ordinary person.
Right.
And it seems to me like it's not just about aging out; it's about a fundamental detachment of the people in this case in Hollywood from the people who they're supposed to provide services or content or whatever it is.
Right, but this is how an art form dies. It's
Right.
It is a coagulation of power in a way. You know, we're sitting a few miles from Washington. In Washington, you can go to Georgetown, named after Washington, and walk down a street that used to be called Washington Street, within sight of the Washington Monument in the middle of Washington, D.C. So you get the picture that George Washington had a big effect on this country. And the thing that is Washington's signal moment is having defeated the British in this, defeated the greatest empire on earth with this ragtag band of half starvelings that wandering around in the snow. He's the king of a continent. He can be the king of a continent. There was nothing to stop him, and he goes to somewhere in Maryland, Annapolis, and he turns over his sword to the civilian powers because he believed that much in the idea of the sovereign people. That also, just like you said, has aged out so that at that moment, the most popular man in America was also the best man in America. And probably one of the best men who ever lived. He was but he was also the most. Now, the people who are popular are completely detached from the power, and the people who are powerful are completely detached from the people. The advent of Donald Trump, which even at the time I said, this is a tragic moment when it takes a man like Donald Trump to speak for the people. Because everybody, and you saw the way the power just came to shut him down. This is not about whether Trump's a nice person or a good person or anything like that. It's simply what he represented to people for 50 years. For 50 years, the powers that be told people in this country, you stink. Your country stinks. Your religion stinks. The color of your skin stinks. Everything about your history, it stinks. Your God doesn't exist. And then they thought, well, why did they elect Donald Trump? It's my feeling was, you're lucky they didn't show up outside your house with a torch and a pitchfork and toss you into the Potomac. This was the nice thing. Electing Donald Trump was the nice thing to do. So you're absolutely right. I mean, I think that as people think their way out of morality, as they think their way out of your individuality, the importance of your individuality. It's easy for me to feel my individuality and my reality, but you have to sort of really think about it to think, maybe that guy sitting across from me is just as important to himself as I am to me, and that we're both equally important to God. Then you have art, then you have the Enlightenment, then once you get that idea, then you have all the kind of beautiful things that Europe produced. And once you lose that idea, you lose everything. And I think you're absolutely right. That kind of coagulation of power, money, political ideas in an aristocracy that does not care anymore for the people, that has no noblesse oblige, is the way a country ages out as well.
And you can see it, but going back to this idea of the movies, where the values that America used to embody and used to celebrate, if you think about the movies of the 80s and 90s, strength, resilience, independence, taking responsibility for yourself. You look at the movies now, and it's unrecognizable. You think to yourself, what message are you trying to send me? How are you trying to inspire me?
Yes, that is, it's an amazing thing. The people who built the movie industry, the people who made the movies I love and probably you love as well, many of them were immigrants, many of them were Jews, and they loved this place. They loved America. I mean, because they'd seen what the rest of the world was like, especially the Jewish guys. They knew exactly what they had going on in America. And they were liberal in the sense that they wanted to be included. But they were businessmen who thought their business depended on the audience liking what they did. So if the audience was Christian, they'd give them Christians. They have a scene where the Christian guy would be nice to a Jew, and then that would give you a good feeling, and they would say, yes, we're part of this country too, and everybody said, yes, you are. That was great stuff, but they may not have loved the people individually, but they loved them as the audience. They were their source of their income, they were the source of their popularity, their power, everything, and they served them. They served the people. Partially because the studio system was destroyed by the courts. Essentially the inmates took over the asylum in Hollywood. This is part of the death throes of the industry. But you had this moment when they lost the studio system. Studios had a monopoly. They had a monopoly on theaters. The court said you can't. There was a trust busting case, and they destroyed that. So ultimately now, the power rested with actors and not with businessmen. And so you have actors who are great businessmen like Arnold Schwarzenegger and Tom Cruise. They're great businessmen, but they're still not about the people. Those are bad examples because Cruise and Schwarzenegger actually are about the people, but so many of these guys, you know, you make a movie, you give an Oscar to a movie like, what was it called? Moonlight? Was that what it was called? It was an Oscar-winning film about a black gay guy discovering that he's gay, you know? It wasn't a bad film, but it was like a slice of life about this, you know, like this. And then you think about Gone with the Wind. You think about the movies that have won Oscars that just gave you all of life. You know, they gave you so many things. Casablanca. I mean, that movie, you can watch that movie today. You can watch it twice in a row today, and it'll still break your heart. Whereas, you know, a black gay guy in the ghetto is an interesting story. I'll watch that once, you know, but it's not telling me something that I need to know to get forward in life. Whereas the fact that sometimes you have to give up the thing you love for a greater cause is something I needed to know. The movies shaped, you know, it's funny. The arts shaped me. You know, I wasn't happy at home. I had a bad relationship with my dad. I went first to novels and then to movies for male role models. Mm-hmm. And I found Bogart, John Wayne, these, you know, Raymond Chandler's, Philip Marlowe, the great detective guy, Sam Spade. And they taught me these simple things, you know. They taught me how to walk. They taught me, you know, what you would sacrifice for. They taught me that you would sacrifice for something. During the pandemic recently, there was this moment when Donald Trump got COVID, and he came back to the White House, and he said, now I've had COVID. Don't be afraid. Don't let it dominate your life. And there is this montage that I play on my show from time to time of the news media coming out going, what a horrible thing to, of course you should be afraid. Of course, this could kill you. What's wrong? You know, that. And I don't know if I was the last person in America with all those movies in my head saying, wait a minute, you know, there are things that are more important than dying, you know, like slavery, like losing your freedom, like losing your dignity, like, you know, losing the chance to be the thing that you want to be. People have died for all those things through time. And yet here was the news media, one of them after another, saying, no, that mean, awful Donald Trump, you know, you must be afraid, you must be afraid. And then they sit around going, why would anybody vote for Donald Trump? You know, these are the things we learned from the movies. And we learned them before that from, you know, British novels, I think, more than anything else. And these are the things that are gone, in my opinion, from a world without God. Because why would you risk your life if there's nothing beyond yourself? You know, why would you risk your life for anything if there's nothing beyond yourself? If something doesn't have a quality of the eternal to it, like freedom, like you know, justice. If those things, why would you die for them? If everything is just material, you know, you're here, you're gone, meaningless.
And that's the reason I'm such a huge Arthur Miller fan, the playwright Arthur Miller. And it's why, for me, the play The Crucible resonates harder than ever, especially now.
Yeah.
When you have Proctor, and he gives John Proctor, and at the end when he's about to die, and he refuses to give up anybody else, and he says, but leave me my name. That's all I have. That's all any man has.
Yes, and then think, you know, of Andrew Cuomo, who was made a hero. He was the governor of New York, and he was made into a hero, the anti-Trump. Yeah. And he said, you know, we have to do all this stuff because it's death, and nothing is worse than death. Death is death, and death, when you're dead, you're dead. You know, and he's just like, who are these people? You know, it's like run and hide, everybody. And you know, this is kind of the instrument of power. Everything is a catastrophe. Everything is an emergency. The climate is an emergency. You go like, you know, it's a little warm today. Oh my, it's an emergency. Give me more power. You know, racism is an emergency. Racism is a health emergency. You know, give us more power. COVID is an emergency. Give us more power. It's always back to that. You know, it's always basically they're going to take care of you.